Mazzy Star was responsible for the early 90s sleeper hit Fade Into You. Featuring David Roback, who wrote most of the band's music, he was a talented multi-instrumentalist. He would be joined by singer Hope Sandoval, who wrote most of the band's lyrics, a breathy vocalist with a haunting yet hopeful voice. Fade Into You would be released on the band's 1993 sophomore album, So Tonight That I Might See. There was something pure about the band's sound and their recording process. In a 2020 interview with Refinery 29, Sandoval said, "I like to hang out in restaurants and cafes, eavesdrop on people's conversations, and collect new stories. Then I go home and spend the evenings embellishing them," she'd say. Part of the band's magic came from the soulmate-like connection between Roback and Sandoval, and in a 2018 interview with Double J, Sandoval would say that half the time we don't even need to speak to each other, we use telepathy. The pair was even rumored to be a couple during the recording of their debut album. The song Fade Into You became an anthem for lovelorn teenagers in the 90s, and Hollywood soon took notice. The song was licensed to more than 30 movies and television shows, and it would be covered by Ben Harper, Kelly Clarkson, and Dinosaur Jr. But whatever happened to the group's frontwoman Hope Sandoval, and what has she been doing during the pandemic? That's what we're going to discuss in today's video. There would be an 8-year difference between Hope Sandoval and David Roback. Roback viewed himself as an outsider, telling The Guardian, "I was fairly different from the other kids. I didn't get on with them. We didn't have many common interests. My hobbies were psychiatry and history. I'd psychoanalyze my friends." He found himself in New York in the late 70s, wanting to become a painter, telling the LA Times in 1990, "I went to New York mainly to be part of the art scene, but I gradually found myself getting more inspired by what was happening in music than in art, people like Patti Smith and television." But while he identified with artists who were instrumental in the punk rock scene, the sound he soon started developing was anything but, saying in the same interview, "I felt like a punk, that's the attitude I identified with. When I picked up the guitar and started playing it, the music didn't come out sounding punk. It was something else," he'd say. After a brief stint in New York, he would head back to LA. Roback and Sandoval both started off in other bands before coming together to form Mazzy Star. Roback went to UC Berkeley studying art and started his first band with his brother Steven called Unconscious with Susanna Hoffs, who would later go on to co-found the group The Bangles. The two brothers started their next band, Rain Parade, in 1982, and they soon gained a following in the LA indie scene. The soft-spoken Sandoval came from East LA, where her father was a butcher and her mother worked at a potato chip factory. She was the youngest of 10 children, being born to a Mexican-American family. The area she grew up in was pretty rough, telling The Guardian, "My brother was involved with gangs, and everybody knew that in the neighborhood, so nobody messed with you." In a separate interview, she told the LA Times, "We lived on the most popular drug street." Despite the turmoil around her, she grew up in a musical household, telling the paper, "There was a lot of music in my house growing up. My sister loved country music, my mother loved Spanish music, my dad was into big band music and jazz." She was given her first guitar at the age of 13, and she would take inspiration from Exene Cervenka of the LA punk group X and the Rolling Stones. Side note guys, I've done a whole video on the band X, the link is down below. Sandoval told The Telegraph, "I was a massive Rolling Stones fan. I wanted to play music like they were doing, and I thought I might do that." Sandoval's parents would separate when she was just a child, and she would primarily be raised by her mother. She struggled in school and was not really social with other students, and was at one point put in a special education class. She would eventually ditch classes and listen to recordings at home, telling The Telegraph, "It's just like anybody else. Most people don't want to go to school. They just don't want to. I was somebody who got away with it. There really wasn't anyone watching," she'd say. The school she attended gave her parents an ultimatum. Either she comes to class or she would be homeschooled. Sandoval would be homeschooled for a short period of time, but things didn't work out. After all, her parents never graduated, so they never had a leg to stand on. The nights would see Sandoval sneaking out of her house to go to local clubs to watch bands play. She would form the group Going Home while she was still a teenager with friend Sylvia Gomez in the early 80s. The duo's third gig happened during the early part of the 80s, opening for both the Minutemen and Sonic Youth at the Anti-Club in Hollywood, with Sandoval recalling to the LA Times, "It was a crazy, crazy crowd. We just thought, what are we doing here? But they were so sweet to us. Everybody stayed really quiet and listened." Both women were also big fans of Rain Parade, so they decided to make a bold move to get on their radar. After a 1983 Rain Parade concert, Gomez snuck backstage to give David Roback a demo tape. At that time, Roback was under contract with Rough Trade Records, while Going Home was still unsigned but doing gigs around LA. Upon hearing their demo, Roback offered to produce the group's first album and play guitar on the record, but it is yet to be released to this very day. Sandoval would tell Quietus her reaction to getting a phone call from Roback after giving him the demo, saying, "I felt like the luckiest person ever. I cannot believe he wanted to join our band. He called me and said, 'I really love your music and I want to play guitar for you guys,' but things wouldn't work out quite as Sandoval anticipated." It was also during this time that Roback left Rain Parade and Los Angeles and retreated to Berkeley, not feeling a connection to the city's music scene. Roback briefly joined the music collective called Rainy Day, and then went on to form his third band, Clay Allison, which was later renamed Opal, with vocalist Kendra Smith. Together they released 1987's Happy Nightmare Baby, but Smith would depart the band during their tour with the group The Jesus and Mary Chain. Roback was midway through a 2-record deal with Rough Trade, so Sandoval took over Smith's place on vocals. Both Sandoval and Roback came from different musical backgrounds and influences. Sandoval would tell Quietus, "David definitely knew more about music and equipment than me. He knew more about the Velvet Underground. I didn't really know their music. Sylvia was really into them and I was always saying, 'Turn that off, it's too noisy.' But when I started working with David, he turned me onto them. I liked modern stuff like Soul to Soul, along with Syd Barrett and the Rolling Stones, so it worked even though we were coming from different places." If you guys have read interviews with the pair, then you know they're pretty quiet, reserved, and can be socially awkward. Jeff Travis, who worked for Rough Trade Records, would tell Uncut Magazine, "They're not your normal rock and roll people. I really do think they live in their own world." Dave and Hope would tour as Opal for 2 years and worked on their second Rough Trade album called Ghost Highway, but they ended up scrapping the material. Sandoval was unhappy with the quality of the music that the pair had come up with and wanted a fresh start, so they formed a new group called Mazzy Star and headed to Hyde Studios where they recorded 7 new songs. These tracks became the basis for Mazzy Star's debut record, 1990's She Hangs Brightly. A former employee for Rough Trade would tell the Telegraph what happened when Hope and David flew to Britain in 1989 to play one of Opal's final shows, telling the paper, "Hope and David sat in the Rough Trade office all day long, smoking and silent. They weren't horrible or anything, they were polite. It was just difficult to know how to please them. They were only there for 2 days, but it felt like an eternity." The band's debut album landed them a spot on the Billboard Alternative Song charts with their cover of the slap-happy song Blue Flower, which would peak at number 29. Sandoval's first bandmate Sylvia Gomez also penned the song Give You My Lovin'. Not only that, but the album would be one of the strongest debut records of 1990, making the top 10 on the CMJ New Music Report survey of college and alternative rock radio stations playlists. Nirvana's Kurt Cobain even listed the album as his top 50 favorite records, and the album still made a mark 4 years later when Fade Into You hit it big, with the track Holla charting as well on the alternative rock charts. The band's sound seemed to be heavily influenced by the Paisley Underground, a California movement that combined psychedelic sounds with rich vocals that was influenced by 60s groups like Love and the Byrds. The band also drew many comparisons to the group Cowboy Junkies, more specifically their double platinum 1988 album The Trinity Session. But David Roback would push back against these comparisons, telling the LA Times, "I never even heard the Cowboy Junkies record, but then I don't listen to a lot of contemporary music. I kind of purposely try to avoid it because I don't want to be influenced by it. I prefer Rip Van Winkle's approach to art." In a separate interview, Roback would tell the Seattle Times how songwriting actually worked between the pair, saying, "Once Hope and I have a song, we get together with the people in the band. Each song's a little different, and we experiment. A lot of the times it comes together the first time we play it with people," he'd say. When it came time to promoting the band's work, Roback seemed to do 90% of the talking. Sandoval was pretty reserved, not talking much about her personal life or lyrical themes. Roback would discuss Sandoval during an interview with The Times, saying, "I think Hope deserves a lot of attention. I think she's a great singer and a great songwriter. When I first heard her, I thought she could be someone like Bob Dylan, someone who could speak for a lot of people her age. I see a lot of hope in her songs. It's like that movie, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Something nice can come out of a very caustic environment, something that tells you all isn't lost," he'd say. While the band experienced some success with their debut album, they were also suspicious of it, with Roback telling The Independent, "I think a lot of it's frivolous. It's like being popular at school. What does being popular at school mean? It means nothing." Sandoval, meanwhile, refused to discuss her lyrics, turned down autograph requests, and hated performing live. However, her autograph policy seems to have changed in recent years. She would reveal in an interview, "Personally, I have a hard time playing live. A big part of it is because the lyrics are really private. It seems like a lot of the times the audience isn't ready for that. A lot of them are just hanging out drinking. There are times you can hear the girl alongside of you in the audience talking about her wardrobe or something. It gets that way when you get kind of popular. You get all these different kinds of people and some don't care. I used to get really hostile about it. I just used to lose my temper and tell the audience to shut up," she'd say. And that was something you may recognize about the band. Reading a lot of their interviews, getting a straight answer or even much of an answer seemed pretty difficult. difficult. So why were they so press shy? Well, Sandoval would tell Enemy, it's difficult. Sometimes they feel like job interviews. You don't really know the person, referring to interviewers. You're asked a lot of these questions. With Roback adding, I just don't think we really need to explain it to anybody, or for that matter, to ourselves or to each other, referring to the group's music. Soon after the release of their debut album, the US branch of Rough Trade Records folded, and in an attempt to avoid bankruptcy, the band was traded to major label Capitol Records. The band spent the next couple of years working on material that would become their sophomore hit, So Tonight That I Might See. The album would produce the band's biggest hit, Fade Into You, but it may surprise you to know that many people have misinterpreted the song, and the pair never anticipated the single to take off like it did. The dreamy song, whose lyrics are about heartache and longing, accompanied by piano and slide guitar, is not actually a nostalgic song. As Roback would tell Australia News, it was never intended to be a nostalgic song, unless you were meant to think about nostalgia for the present, because it was really about the present. We used to walk on the beach a lot and walk around the city. It came almost at the same time. We weren't trying to write a hit song, we were just writing a song. According to Roback in the same interview, the music came together pretty quickly, and the pair wrote the song in about one day. The song would push So Tonight That I Might See to go platinum, selling over 1 million copies in the US, and the song would peak at number 3 on the modern rock charts in America. The single also had crossover appeal, peaking at number 44 on the Hot 100 charts. Unlike bands who hate their hit songs, Mazzy Star didn't feel that way. Roback would reveal to Australia News, "It's just one of our songs. We play it because we want to play it." To many across the pond in the UK, people's first exposure to the band happened in 1994 on The Jools Holland Show. Also appearing on the episode that night was the Man in Black, Johnny Cash, who expressed admiration for Mazzy Star's music and even asked Hope Sandoval to perform with him on stage, but she declined, citing her nerves. It was during the mid-90s that Sandoval dated the Jesus and Mary Chain's William Reed for 3 years and sang on the band's song Sometimes Always. Even after Mazzy Star's success with their 1994 sophomore album, the band never looked at the mainstream for cues, let alone understood where they fit in with popular music, with Roback telling the Baltimore Sun, "I don't really look personally to contemporary radio myself to find any kind of meaningful definition of accessibility. We've always just had the attitude that we weren't going to be played by radio, so we never really tried to fit in, and it still doesn't really seem like we fit in," he'd say. So what happened to the group after their second album? The band was still kept in the public eye. In addition to touring and television appearances, the label landed the band some high-profile slots, with their music appearing in the films Batman Forever and Stealing Beauty. As the band's label saw it, these two films kept the band in the public eye, while also bookending their demographic, with Batman Forever appealing to the college crowd, while Stealing Beauty appealed to the baby boomers. In 1996, Mazzy Star released their highly anticipated follow-up, Among My Swan, and upon releasing the album, Capitol Records head of marketing Clark Staub spoke to Billboard magazine and discussed how the band's demographic crossed generations, telling the publication, "You're not just selling to 14-year-olds, and you're not just selling to 35-year-olds. In the same interview, Staub pointed out the band's favorable press coverage with NPR, People and Time magazine, and surprisingly, Martha Stewart Living, which included the group's sophomore record as one of the best albums to play during a dinner party. Staub would say with a laugh, "We didn't ask for that." Among My Swan would be a commercial disappointment for Capitol Records, peaking at number 68 on the Billboard album charts, and it would sell less than a quarter of its predecessor. It was during this time that Sandoval reportedly begged the band's label to be released from their contract, feeling like a commodity, and they were tired of record label interference. Telling About.com in 2011, it seemed record companies wanted bands to be creative because they didn't know how to manufacture underground music. We could do our own thing and go at our own pace, but that changed when the major labels started wanting bands that would sell 7 million records. They had a formula, and suddenly all these people wanted to come into the studio to keep track of what we were doing and to make sure we were following that formula, so we got out. In a separate interview with the LA Times, she would reveal, "They wanted me to work with big producers. I wanted to produce my music and they weren't having that. I'm sure they were happy to let me go." And in a separate interview with Vice, she would reveal how bittersweet it was leaving Capitol Records, saying, "We were really happy, but we were broke. We ran out of money quick. It was back to the old days after that. There were some hard times, but everybody experiences hard times," she'd say. The band stopped releasing music publicly for almost 13 years, and the group went on a temporary hiatus. Sandoval continued to work with Roback on music during this time off, but the pair would tell The Guardian, "We weren't really in the mood to release music." After Mazzy Star went on hiatus in 1997, Sandoval and Roback drifted into other musical projects. Sandoval would collaborate with other groups, including Massive Attack and the Chemical Brothers. And she would also start the band Hope Sandoval and the Warm Inventions with Kolo Milosevic, the drummer for the reunited My Bloody Valentine. The two began working together after being introduced by the Jesus and Mary Chain's William Reed. Hope and Colum would share a house in Berkeley where a lot of their first album, Bavarian Fruitbread, was recorded, with additional sessions occurring in Ireland and Sonoma County. It was a dream come true for Sandoval, who played with an idol of hers, Bert Jansch, as she would tell Quietus. Bert and I did play some guitar together because he was under the impression that that would be part of the recording process. I just thought he was going to play on his own. So when he got to the recording studio, he wanted me to play guitar with him, which was really scary for me. In the end, we just took my guitar parts out and kept his in. Hope Sandoval and the Warm Inventions would release several more albums, including 2009's Through the Devil Softly and 2016's Until the Hunter. By the end of the 2000s, questions would come up about Mazzy Star's future and how the band had influenced many other groups, with Sandoval telling an interviewer, "We're sort of sheltered in our own little bubble. We don't really know what outsiders are thinking." During their hiatus, Roback relocated from LA to Norway, collaborating with other artists, and even contributing music to art installations. And then in 2012, Mazzy Star finally reunited as they completed an 18-day tour of California and Europe, with some dates in 2013 as well. Roback confirmed the same year that the band was recording a new album called Seasons of Your Day, and the album was officially released in September of 2013. It would be a career high for the band, peaking at number 24 on the UK album charts and number 42 on the Billboard album charts. However, tragedy would strike when Mazzy Star's drummer Keith Mitchell, who had played on all of their 4 albums, died in May of 2016 after a short battle with cancer. It would be 5 years since the band had reunited for a performance, and they would come together again for a 3-night series in 2018 at the Sydney Opera House for Vivid Live. That gig would get media attention because some fans walked out mid-performance, as the entire concert was done in the dark, leaving some concertgoers frustrated. The same month, the band released their EP called Still. Roback would keep in touch with his old Opal bandmate Kendra Smith and was planning on a re-release of Happy Nightmare Baby and a compilation of their early EPs called Early Recordings. Sadly, Roback would pass away from cancer in February of 2020 before the work was released. Roback would be mourned by many fellow musicians, and following his death, Hope Sandoval would share a poem on social media remembering her friend and bandmate, saying, "What will we do now that you leave me here? Even though the dark blue sky is still radiant and filled with comforting sadness that holds us together." On the subsequent anniversary of his death, she would post a tribute to her friend on social media. The last year, Sandoval gave an interview to Rock and Roll Globe, revealing what she's been up to lately during the pandemic. And it was in that interview she would praise Miley Cyrus's cover of Fade Into You and discussed future plans for music, saying, "Colm and myself haven't really talked about what our next plans are, as we're both working on other projects, but I do look forward to doing some more music with those guys. They're all such amazing musicians. I feel so lucky to know them and have created such great songs and sounds with them. Just before the pandemic hit, we suffered the loss of David, and it was a massive blow. So everything shut down for me at that moment, and then the world shut down. It was like, now let's add fear and loneliness to the grieving. What a nightmare it's been for everyone," she'd say. She would end the interview with a somber reflection of being 55 years old, saying, "I've suffered a lot of losses and it's been really difficult. I want to be more like that little green lizard that loses its tail, and something beautiful happens and her tail grows back and everything is balanced again." That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe, and we'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.